Hey YouTube, Repo Man 64. I want to go into, now this is the new year. None of us wanted to be here. We're looking at everything that's going on in the world and we're actually surprised and shocked that we're still here. But I want to give you some confirmations that I found. I redid the timeline. I spent all New Year's Day redoing this timeline. And I noticed in my previous timeline that the year is split up into two parts. Previous to the flood, previous to the law handed down to Moses, the law handed down to Moses, where God says in Exodus 12, I want you now to make this the head of your year. The head of the year was in September. September the 15th was the head of the year. They knew this not because they looked at the moon. The two witnesses that were standing out there looking were not looking for the first sliver of the moon. They were looking for the fourth star of Pegasus called Algernum. It skirts along the horizon, marking the end of the year and the end of the 6-month period. Both times it happens, it will happen on March the 16th, and it will happen again on September the 14th. It is exactly 182 days and 182 days apart, or 183, when you have to count, I'll show you in here, the long day. Well, 1 day equals 48 hours. The good news is the Kaduri prophecy is still relevant. I told you in the last video there were two Sabbaths that it possibly could be. It could have been New Year's Eve, which fell on a Saturday, could have been the last Sabbath. When Kaduri says the Sabbath after, he's not talking about the next weekend. He is talking about the end of the period of time. But he's not talking to the bride. I don't believe we will be here that long. I believe this is the beginning of something for the Jew. Is it their time of tribulation for the Jew, where God turns his attention back to the Jews, where the tribulation again is for the salvation of the Jewish nation? I'm going to show you that in this timeline. I'm going to go over a couple of pieces. It's not going to be a long video. I just want to show you a few things that I found, which I thought were cool. Again, the bride will go. I believe that this prophecy from Kaduri, number one, the guy in 1979 wrote this down. In this page, which you're going to read, he names Jesus Christ as the Messiah. They did not like that over there. He writes this in 1979, seals in an envelope, gives it to his students, tells his students, do not open this envelope for 1 year after I've died. Again, I got thank you for the comments, by the way. You help me out a lot when you help with some of the research, and I appreciate that. 2006, Kaduri dies. 2007, they open this envelope. Inside of this envelope that he wrote back in 1979, we're going to read it. In there, he names Jesus Christ as the Messiah. Jews are not happy about that. They will not believe in that. That's the purpose of tribulation. Its purpose is not to punish mankind, although Satan will be here doing that, just like he did to Job. God said, go ahead. Do what you got to do, but don't kill him. During the tribulation, this period of time is to turn the hearts of man who's desperately wicked and turn it back to God. This will cause a repentance. Remember, the Bible has a passage that says they will look up and see the one that they pierced, and they will cry, and they will mourn. They will realize that they messed up 2,000 years ago, and of course, God will forgive them. That's the purpose of tribulation. It is not a punishment, although Satan is coming after everyone. It is not God's punishment. God's punishment is hellfire for all eternity. Our concern as we go through this, my concern is to warn people of the final destination. Again, I was talking to those two young men at lunchtime today, and they have questions every day. And one of them says, that when you die, it just goes dark. I'm like, did you not finish high school? He said, yeah. I said, have you ever heard that energy cannot be destroyed or created? It can only change its form. He said, yes. Why do you think you're any different? You are going to spend an eternity somewhere. Where that is, it all depends on whether or not you turn, and just like the Jews will during the tribulation, they're going to turn, they're going to recognize who they pierced, and they're going to cry for what they have done. They're going to recognize, and that's all God wants. He wants a broken and contrite heart. He wants you to go to him with nothing. Come to him with absolutely nothing and accept him and everything that he's done, which is amazing, by the way. Let me go into this. Go into the Kaduri prophecy first. Right here. Let's read it again. Kaduri prophecy is at the top. He writes this in 1979, seals in an envelope, passes away 2006. The students open it in 2007. How does Kaduri know this stuff? And how is Kaduri correct on everything all the way up to the point of the Sabbath after? And remember, Kaduri is Jewish. Jesus is Jewish. He is writing this to the Jewish people. He is not writing this to the bride. The bride spends way too much time, and I'm guilty of it just as well, as looking at every single sign and every single thing that's going on as directed towards us. And it is not. A lot of this stuff is directed to the Jews. A lot of it's directed to, and you'll find the passages, a lot of it's directed to the saints that will go into part of this to witness the four horsemen, I think. I don't think that, I think the tribulation, I can't prove it either way, but if it lasts 7 years, I don't believe that the saints are going to be here for 3.5. I think God's turning his attention back to the Jew for 7 years. And a part of that, previous to that, will be these 6 seals being opened. But let's go into this. On the eve of the year 5780, the year of corrections, there will be not a government, and this is an accurate statement. On the eve of 5780, we're in the year, according to the Jews, it's actually 5992. It will become 5993 as soon as March 16th comes. God ordered Moses to change the head of the year, so Rosh Hashanah is not in September. Rosh Hashanah is in March, the head of the year. And I'm going to show you here in a moment how I can show that to you, or prove that to you. So this is a fact, 5780, the year of corrections. There will not be a government in Israel for an extended period of time. The various camps will quarrel much without a decision on either side. And on Rosh Hashanah itself, what Rosh Hashanah? Could that have been the Jewish Rosh Hashanah, the ones that they continue to look at, refuse to acknowledge what Moses said? Could that Rosh Hashanah itself have been the deciding factor on September the 15th? And we continue to read. They will fight in heaven. Was there a war that took place in heaven on September the 15th, Rosh Hashanah? The holy side against the side of evil. And God and his entourage will decide between them. And this is all I can say from here, and I swore not to reveal more hidden things. So I believe this event already took place. Now let's read Shoshani. There will come a day that 2 ministers, again, this guy, I don't know what year he wrote this, but he knows that there will be 2 men. I'm guessing it's before it took place. Obviously, a prophecy can only work if it was stated previous to the event. There will come on a day, I mean, I could be a prophet and say that Russia's going to invade Ukraine, right? But I'm not much of a prophet if it already happened. So he wrote this previous to this happening. There will come on the day that 2 ministers win the government in the land of Israel, but both their names will be Benjamin, and neither one of them will succeed in establishing their government or kingship. On that day, know and understand the King Messiah already stands at the doorway, and the Sabbath after, he will come and be revealed. All right. Now, I don't think that Shoshani has recognized Jesus as the Messiah. I'm not sure about that. So King Messiah that they're searching for will come. And again, remember the Bible tells us that the Antichrist will come and take the place of the Messiah, pretending to be the Messiah. So we have a similar prophecy where two ministers are fighting. They don't win the government. But on the Sabbath after, now remember, if you do call what Kaduri said as Rosh Hashanah, as the war in heaven, and then read into Shoshani and read that the Sabbath after, the very next Sabbath is not the following Saturday. The very next Sabbath to reset the year, every single year, is March 16th. That's the very next one. Stacy's at the doorway, and on the Sabbath after, he will come and be revealed. Shoshani's statement continues. Understand this and remember it. So he's wanting everybody to pay attention to this fact. All right. I'm going to go back through this real quick. Why I say what I say. On March 16th. March 16th is the last day of the year. It is the 364th day and is the day of equal night and day in Jerusalem. You can look this up. Anybody can. We could have 2 or 3 witnesses right now. One of them could see the Star of Elginim, and one of them could look this up on the internet and see that this day will have 12 hours in the day and 12 hours at night. This is also the day Jesus referenced when talking about Lazarus dying as being, are there not 12 hours in a day? This is the date Lazarus died. With the sunrise and sunset times occurring at 5:45 and solar noon occurring at 11:48 a.m. on March the 16th is the 7th day Sabbath and sets the 7-day Sabbath for the next year on both the Enoch calendar and the Gregorian calendar. So every Saturday we come and we call it a Sabbath. We actually have a whole group of people that will not work on Saturday and worship on the Sabbath. If they did not start their year, if they wanted to obey the law, that's fine. If they did not start their year and call the last Sabbath of the year as March 16th and reset it, and then 7 days later, after that, no matter what day it appears, because these days that we call the days of our week are not accurate. It's day 1, day 2, day 3. You can read it in Genesis during the creation. And sets the 7th-day Sabbath for the next year on both the Enoch calendar and the Gregorian calendar. March 17th is New Year's Day in every year. But the world calls this day St. Patrick's Day. One long day happens on the 14th and the 15th. And I showed you this also last week, that you will see these witnesses that are out there are not looking for the first sliver of the moon. There's an actual warning in the book of Enoch not to look at the moon. This moon concept came from the Romans who invaded Israel and forced them to look at the moon for their new year. There are people who will look at the moon and say there are 13 months, but we have 12 constellations. There are people that will look to the new moon and Catch just knocked something over. I was like, is that the rupture? They will look at the moon for a bunch of various reasons, but it is not the moon that these two witnesses are witnessing. They are witnessing the fourth star of Pegasus called Algenim, appearing on the horizon at 5:45 a.m. just before sunrise, and it is the sign of the last day of the year, ending the winter season. It is the last Sabbath, and it is the Sabbath that you begin counting each 7 days to your next Sabbath. And does it again one more time. Does this every year. It has since the creation, and it will until God destroys this planet after the 1,000-year millennium and creates it anew. The square of Pegasus also appears shown above on September the 14th every year, rising in the northeast sky at 5:47 p.m. just after sunset, and it is the sign of the last day of summer, the summer season. You do not start your Sabbaths from here. Your Sabbaths were already established back on March 16th, and you go again to March 16th to reset. Blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand. Unto him that loved us and washed us from our sin in his own blood, and hath made us kings and priests. Remember, there's only one king and priest that we've ever found in the Bible, and that is It was Jesus that came back after a war. It was Melchizedek. Glad I remembered that. Melchizedek. There is no such thing as a king and a priest. There is only kings or priests. Only Jesus is the king and priest, and we will be made king and priests once we are raptured. He hath made us kings and priests unto God and his Father, and to him be glory and dominion forever and ever. Right here, this is the law that they have ignored. Right here, it's written in Numbers. It's clear as a bell. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year unto you. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take unto them every man a lamb. Now this is speaking of the 10th day. This is the triumphant entry. This is where Jesus rides in on the donkey. He is sending himself in as the ultimate sacrifice for all mankind 4 days prior to his crucifixion, which is on the 14th. How can you know these dates if you don't start your year accurately? If you look at the moon, and the moon jumps every single year by 10 days. It jumps all over the place, and I'm going to show you that. I did a little math here from December 31st, which is the last Sabbath that we thought. It is March 16th. Somebody sent this to me, by the way, in a comment. I thought it was brilliant. They sent me, it was either that one or this one. So I was like, wow, that's actually brilliant right there. I want you to notice 75 days that Abraham was 75 years old. I'm going to show you that on the timeline also. Abraham was 75 years old when he went into Canaan. He was born in 1948. I thought that because I read somewhere that it was Sivan 15, that he was born on May 30th. However, because of the jumbling around that they do with the time following the moon, I actually now believe that Abraham was born on May 14th, 1948 BC, and that in May 14th, 1948 AD is when Israel became a nation, and 75 years after that, some big stuff is going to go down for the nation of Israel. What date is that up there? March 16th, 2023. It points directly. This point, it could have been 78 days, it could have been 72 days, but it wasn't. It points directly at Abraham, 75 years old. Again, from the Revelation 12 sign to March 16th, 2023 is exactly 2,000 days. Jesus said, I will come back after 2 days. This is the 2,000 years and 2,000 days since Jesus Christ came. He's giving us two different dates here. One to the end of the tribulation and one to the beginning of the tribulation. I do believe now that the tribulation begins on March 16th. I want to show you the jumbling around just to prove to you this happens. Rosh Hashanah is stated that it will happen on September the 15th. This year, only in 2023, this year, most of their feast days that they call out a date to will match the Enoch timeline. This year, I'm only showing the Enoch timeline. It's too confusing to see all the other calendars. I gave them an opportunity all year long. A whole year I went with that timeline to see if anything jumped out. A few minor things did, but nothing major. Obviously not the rapture. I call this year Rosh Hashanah the middle of the year, not the head of the year, the middle of the year, Tishri 1 on September the 15th. And so do the Jews this year. On May 14th, 1948, the Jews called it the 5th of Iyar. This is the date where the Jewish people came back into their land on May 14th, 1948. This year, April 26th, they changed the entire month. How does God tell Moses, this now is the head of your year, this month is the head of your year, when they moved this Iyar 5, an entire month? It went from May 14th, it went backwards to April 26th. Literally 18 days away. They're 18 days off this year from that year. And honestly, IR5 was not May 14th back in 1948. As a matter of fact, IR29 was. IR29 was actually May 14th in 1948. All right. I think that's it. Okay, let's go through the timeline. I want you to see the purple bar down the center. I have duplicated the Sabbath and the head of the year. Well, I duplicated the Sabbath there so you can see how this 6-month period, this is for the flood. This is for what Jesus did for us. There are 2 6-month periods. Each 6-month period, one has 182 days. The other one has technically 183 days because of the day out of time. The day that counts for 2 is the sun. Remember, he kept it up in the sky. Down here at the end, I showed it twice, at the end and at the beginning. God is the beginning and the end, right? Lazarus dies. Mary and Martha bury him. They are unclean for 7 days because they have touched a dead body. They can have no contact with Jesus during this period of time, during these 7 days. This is the day of equal parts on March 16th. All right, let's go back to the head of the... I want to show you where we're at right now. We are now just after January 1st here. This is January 1st is the date that Mary travels. She travels 7 or 8 days, I'm not exactly sure, 7 or 8 days to see her cousin. It was a Pentecost when she showed up to see her cousin Elizabeth. Elizabeth was pregnant with John the Baptist, who leapt in the womb. And at this moment in time, January 1st, Mary was 1 week pregnant. I got another comment. You guys are awesome. I got another comment that says, did you know that it takes approximately 7-8 days for the egg to attach itself to the uterine wall in order to solidify the pregnancy so that the new baby can get sustenance that it needs? Mary conceives, and at that moment in the Bible you will read that Elizabeth is 6 months pregnant. From this moment here, 40 weeks, it takes us exactly to September 29th, September 30th, depending on what side of the planet you're on, but Jesus is born on September the 29th. Every event that revolves around Jesus, from his conception to his egg attaching to the uterine wall, to his birth, and to his circumcision 8 days later, is 4 events. These 4 events must fall on the timeline. There is no pushing of this timeline. When you start the year on March 16th and you go through, all of these events fall directly on this timeline. They don't budge, they don't move. They stay exactly the same year after year. So on January the 1st, now unbeknownst to Mary, not God, God obviously knew when he allowed King Gregory to create this calendar. God obviously knew that December the 25th would be celebrated as Jesus Christ's birth, and that New Year's Day we'd simply celebrate it. Unbeknownst to Mary at this time and her cousin Elizabeth, it was December 25th for her. And actually, it was Tevet 10 for her. She didn't care. You know, she went to see her cousin. When she gets to see her cousin, John leaps in the womb. She is, at that moment, pregnant for 7 days, 8 days, and the egg attaches itself to the uterus wall. Dreams, people are having dreams, are seen, and I've seen it. So many pictures I've taken and posted them on here of 11/11. Did you know that Shavat 11 on January 24th is 11/11? Now, I thought that was pretty cool, but then this happened. As I was doing my timeline, I'm doing all my math, and this happens. Did you know that Purim falls exactly 30 days previous to the cross? The cross is always March 30th. 30 days prior to that is Adar 14. This is exactly 30 days before the cross. This date is Purim, 30 days before Passover. It is exactly, if you count your year started on March 16th, it is exactly 11 months and 11 days to Purim. from the head of the year, being what Moses was told to be the head of the year by God himself. 11 months and 11 days, Purim, right there. It is exactly 11:11 from the head of the year. That just jumped right off the page at me when I was doing the timeline. I did not know that 2 days ago. So we find that out. So let's go back to the beginning. This is where it gets interesting. That was pretty interesting. I want to tell you that we are going before the very end here. Lazarus dies. Mary and Martha bury him. They're unclean for 7 days. This is March 16th. This is the last Sabbath that the Shoshone is talking about. This right here is where I don't know if Shoshone recognizes Jesus as the Messiah, or this is the Messiah that they're looking for. I know Kaduri did, but I don't know if Shoshone did. And if not, this is the Antichrist coming on March 16th. We have to go previous to that. Do we go on Purim, March 1st? Do we go, I don't know why I put February 14th there. Do we go on Shabbat 11 or 11/11, which is January 24th? I don't know. We're in it right now. We're definitely in it right now. All right. Again, I put it over here as well. March 16th, the fourth star of Algenum. This is the last Sabbath of the year, when we recognize that God told Moses to change the head of the year, and this now will be the head of your year. He didn't say, and we're going to jump it around when the moon appears. No, none of that is what happened. Go reread the account of Genesis, and you will notice, if you break it down, that God put the stars in heaven for times and seasons and everything else, and he made the sun, and then he made the planets and the sun and the moon. He created time on this day. This is the day of equal parts. It has been since creation, and it will be to the end of the millennium. This is the date that it has always been. You can go on time and date and look back and look forward. You will not see the procession of the day of equal parts. It will change back in the 1700s because they're recognizing those 10 days that Gregorian took away, and they added it back in, causing the calendar to be wrong back then. But there's no doubt that we can look at time and date and see March 16th is the day of equal parts. This is the day Lazarus dies. Mary and Martha bury him. They are unclean for 7 days. Mary and Martha did not walk for 2 days to see Jesus, to let him know that Lazarus was sick. They did not walk. They sent somebody. They stayed there because they were unclean for 7 days, and they could not have any contact, let alone approach God himself, Jesus Christ, and have a chat with him. They had to have a ceremony. If they took 2 days to walk to him, that means that that Mary and Martha dispatched a courier to tell Jesus this on March the 14th. It took 2 days to walk to him. They did, even the couriers that left, the messengers that left, did not know that Lazarus had died. He did die 2 days later, and Jesus knew this. And the messengers show up, say, hey, Lazarus is really sick, you need to go. Jesus lingers for 2 more days until March the 18th, and then he walks for 2 days until March the 20th, where he resurrects Lazarus. He cannot show up there. The reason he waited 4 days, he cannot show up there until Mary and Martha have done their 3rd day ceremony. That's why they raised Lazarus on the 4th day. They have done their ceremony on the 3rd day, and they were officially clean on the 7th, which is why Jesus cannot have a meal with them until they're clean. And that meal happens on Nisan 8, March 24th, with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Now, 1 year earlier on this exact date, Jesus turned water into wine. A lot of events happen on this date, March 24th. This is Moses. You see up there, Nisan 1, March 17. Moses' New Year. You find that in Exodus 12, which is Rosh Hashanah. The Sabbath after, and remember, Shoshani is looking at a Rosh Hashanah as being in September, and the Sabbath after is going to be March 16th. This is, I put it all on here. I posted it in my room on Discord. I'm going to put a link to the Discord. You can go in and look at this and look at everything that I put up here. It would not have worked, and I noticed this throughout the year, that only timeline number 1 would work for the flood. 150 days after the flood began, the water began subsiding. If you do the math from 150 days after the flood began, you land squarely on the cross. If you do the math where the Bible says in the first month and the 17th day, the water, the ark landed, the ark rested. This is also the day that Jesus rises and defeats death. He rested. He did his work. He rested. The water begins to subside. Jesus goes down in the grave, and the ark rests on day 153. None of this fits anywhere else but here. Over here, Thomas in the upper room happens on Nisan 24, which is April the 9th. Second Passover is April the 29th. Israel became a nation. Fact, May 14th, 1948. Can't refute that. Fact. And I believe that I put a red arrow up there. I'm doing more research and having other people try to help me. I believe that Abraham was 75 years old when he entered the land of Canaan, and I believe Abraham was born on May 14th of 1948 BC, and it would never change because that's the day of equal parts. It has been since creation, and it will be until the end of the millennium, May 14th. So I don't want to go on too long. Like I said, I spent hours. I could barely get out of the chair. I sat there so long doing this. I spent hours doing this. Come into Discord and take a look at this timeline and see if you can see anything that you would argue. Again, if we go in and Google what day Israel became a nation, it's going to say IR5, but they're recognizing that moon. I showed you how IR5 now for this year is actually, what was it, the 26th of April, I believe, April 26th. So it jumbles around, and this is simply not, God is consistent, and it's not that hard to figure out. And once you have a solid timeline, you know where all these events take place, you know where they all are. So Shavuot happened on May the 21st. 57 days in between each event. It lands perfectly. If it wasn't 57 days in between each Pentecost exactly, then it wouldn't have been New Year's Day when Mary travels to see Elizabeth. It's a Pentecost. It wouldn't have landed on the first day of creation. Pentecost lands on the first day of creation, which is September the 11th, back when that was the head of the year. Now this is the head of the year. So go to a quiet place by yourself. Nobody needs to know, and you don't need to tell anybody. And go in there and just one-on-one, you and your Lord. And it's not a prideful moment. You don't bring anything to the table, and accept the Lord into your heart. We're going to keep saying this. The watcher's going to watch. They're always going to watch. It's never going to stop. We're going to continue to try to figure this out. And honestly, I cleaned this whole timeline up and put it all together, and it's a lot clearer this year. It's a lot simpler to understand this year because I had to go through all those other timelines to see if there's any, if it warranted anything. But the problem is, when it came to, they were jumping all over the place. But then when it comes to the flood, they can't jump too much. There's not a lot of wiggle room with the flood. And we know it was the second month and the 17th day. We know that. And then it just all ties together with Jesus on the cross. Everything just ties together. There's not, like I said, wiggle room. When you get to Christmas Day, we celebrate on Christmas Day. How is it that if you go from when Jesus was born, which we believe, and it has to be in this time frame, right? It has to be in the time frame of Tishri 15, which is Tabernacles, Sukkot. Jesus comes and tabernacles with us. The Bible tells us that. If you count backwards, 40 weeks, 280 days, boom, you land on Christmas Day. The timeline is accurate, I believe. I'm going to hold to this timeline this year, and I won't show any other timelines because and I'll keep an open mind. Don't get me wrong. I kept an open mind for a whole year. looking at them all, and every single possible way you could look at this and look at that, the moon, the full moon, the quarter moon, the sliver of the moon, and it's way too convoluted, and I just don't think God's that way. I think you start year every year on March 16th and start counting your days from there. It's that simple. I believe that the tribulation begins now on March 16th, the final Sabbath, just like Kaduri. How did Kaduri get all that right? How did Kaduri name Jesus Christ as the Messiah? How did he get all that right and then get that one part wrong? You know, sealed in an envelope in 1979. I don't see it. I don't see him getting that wrong. So, like, comment, share, and subscribe. And hopefully this didn't go on too long. And I will chat with you again later.